Excellent. Okay, 大家好, welcome to this webinar. So my name is Barry Zhang, and I'm a private pilot with Instrument Rating. I will present this in English, but you're free to ask questions in Chinese if you want to. I will answer in English so that everybody can understand once I put it on YouTube. Let's see. Oops, there you go. So we're going to cover essentially the 14. I have total 12 slides, so it'll go pretty fast, and I'll save some time at the end for question and answers. Why we fly, and safety, cost, and how do you choose a certified flight instructor or a flight school. So that's what we're going to cover. And this is me flying my airplane. It's a Diamond Star DA-40. I'll tell you a little bit more about it. So before I go into the actual presentation, I want to tell you a little bit about me. This is my timeline. August the 13th, 2013. That's about a week after my kids went to college. So become an empty nester, I decided to take on flying. So I put in a $10,000 deposit to the flight school in Trenton. Just jumped right in. Never thought I would change my mind. So really put my money where my mouth is. And as soon as I got started, friends were telling me that I should think about buying an airplane, and for money saving purpose, really. And then the other benefit is you fly the same plane. It's the plane that you know very well. You're less likely to make mistakes. You can learn faster. So I took the advice. So a couple months later, by November, I decided to buy one little plane. I'm not sure. Can you see my cursor?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, very good. So that's the first airplane. It doesn't look like much. It's 1972 Cessna 172. 1972, but it's a Cessna 172. It cost me a total about $50,000. I'll tell you why it was a good thing that I did that. So it turns out I started flying that. I bought the plane, and that was the only plane I flew since then. And then I leased it to the flight school. So the flight school were paying me $25 an hour when they use it. And they pay for everything, insurance, repair, tie down, lending, whatever fee that's associated with this. They pay for everything. So they gave me $25 when they use it. And when I fly it, I don't pay for anything. If I were to take a flight lesson, it'll cost me $200 roughly, about an hour. And then because they rent the plane, I have my own plane, so my cost becomes something like $60. So that's a huge saving. So I got my license about exactly a year later, August the 8th. That's actually my father's 82nd birthday. So I told him it was my gift to him. I became a pilot. He was extremely happy. So it took me a whole year, about 90 hours of flying. By law, you are supposed to fly at least 40 hours before you can qualify to take the test. But the average is about 60 to 100 hours, so 80 hours is about average. It took me 90 hours. I felt pretty good about it, but a whole year, it's indeed a pretty long process. So once I got my license, this gentleman, Bob Cherry, he lost his job from the flight school, the same flight school I was taking lessons from. So he lost his job. He wanted to lease this plane from me. Let me get my cursor here. He wanted to lease this plane from me, but that plane was occupied by another flight school, and he essentially lost his way of living. He has nothing else he could do. That's the only way he know how to make a living. So I said, okay, why don't I buy another plane so you can fly? Then you can teach me instrument rating in the same plane. So he became my instructor, and also the flight school who rented this plane for me. So this is the second plane I bought. Cost me $45,000. And I wanted to tell you those two purchases largely because the financial result. So now he's paying me something like $25 to $30 depending on the month. Essentially, I get about $500 a month by renting that plane to him. And then I essentially flew this plane and got my instrument rating about a few months later by March 2015. So it took me another 40 hours to get the instrument rating. Now, instrument rating is a big deal. It took a lot of effort. It is considered one of the most difficult rating in a commercial pilot or any pilot. So it's a really big excitement for me to see that instrument rating. Essentially, instrument rating allows you to fly in the cloud. Otherwise, you cannot touch the cloud. You have to fly in visual conditions. You have to be able to see everything, the airport, the landscape, the horizon. You need to be able to see, have visual contact with everything, unless you have instrument rating. So, and then after I received my instrument rating, both planes were occupied by two different schools. So I really don't feel comfortable flying them anymore because when I fly out a whole day. And even though they both allow me to fly, I didn't feel comfortable doing it. So that's when I decided I should buy my own plane. So I bought a third one. Let me jump back. So really, this is the plane I bought, number 3. This one costs a little bit more. It costs $180,000. I'll tell you a little bit more why it costs more. It is faster. It burns about same amount of gas. It is more efficient. It is safer. So this is a little bit about me. Now, everyone who knows that I'm a pilot, I fly, asks me the same question. Everybody, almost 100%. Everybody wants to ask me, do I need to notify the destination airport before I go anywhere? Say, I'm showing a little airport here in a mountain area. The answer is no. I don't need to tell anybody where I want to go. I don't need to call anybody when I need to land. I can fly 24 hours, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 a year. I can go anywhere. There are more than 5,000 airports around. I don't have to tell them, but I need to notify them right before I land, probably 10 to 20 miles away. I will call in through a common frequency. So there is a tremendous amount of freedom when you do become a pilot. Now, the second question people tend to ask me was whether there's any landing fee associated with flying anywhere. The answer is largely no. About 80 to 85% of the airport do not charge anything. The other 15, 20% of the airport charge you something, $20, $30, $40. 45 was the highest one I ever encountered. And sometimes if you buy the gasoline from them, they would waive the landing fee. So it's a pretty good deal. Now, number one subject we want to talk about today is why we fly. To me, there are two fundamental reasons: passion and mission. A lot of pilots, I would say the majority. Jackson, chime in if you see anything and if you see opportunities. All right, so don't hesitate. Passion to me is probably represent the majority of the pilots out there who just love to fly. They just wanted to fly. They don't have to go anywhere. They don't have to do anything. They just wanted to fly. They just enjoy flying. They enjoy the thrill. They enjoy the view. Even surfing the cloud, sharing with friends, and that's really the passion for flight. And mission to me is something that gives you a purpose. Why you fly? Why do you need an airplane? Putting aside the passion. To me, I wanted to go places. I wanted to go, especially to mountain areas, so that I can go hiking. So that becomes essentially my mission. So a lot of people have passion, but don't necessarily have mission. So that's why you hear a lot about so-called $100 hamburgers. So essentially, the flight would jump in an airplane with a friend, go to another airport, have hamburger together, and then fly back. By the time you calculate it, they spend about $100 each on a hamburger. So that's fairly common. It's a joke, but it's fairly common. So if you ever think about flying, my suggestion is think about both. Think about if you wanted to fly, you must have a passion. but think about what you can do with flying and then have a mission. That mission doesn't necessarily mean part of your current lifestyle. You don't have to hike. You don't have to ski. You don't have to fish. You may just want to be a volunteer. I mean, you can fly. Excuse me, I just allowed somebody else to join us. So we have 14 people now. So you can fly to be a volunteer. There are two organizations I joined. One of them is Angel Flight. So essentially fly patients who cannot afford to go from a small town to a big city to get medical treatment. That's number one. Number two, Hawk Flight, Hawk Light, or Light Hawk. I think it's Hawk Light. What they do is provide environmentalists to fly to an area to survey the land, survey the forest, survey the lake and river. So you essentially provide the free flight for them. And I also volunteer as a Young Eagles flight. So essentially giving free ride to young children so that they can get a chance to know whether they can actually be part of the aviation industry. So if you can combine passion and a mission, I think that's really would be the best thing. Otherwise, just passion alone sometimes is not enough. Having a mission, and sometimes it could be just your life itself. You may need to go to see your children or your grandchildren, and so they could be, say, living in Boston. If you were to drive to Boston, that could be easily 5-6 hours. You cannot really make it into a day trip. But if you were to fly in a plane like this, then it's an hour and 45 minutes. So you can fly there in the morning and come back in the evening and still have dinner at home. So it becomes an amazing transportation tool. Okay, let's see. Oops. Now, the biggest question people ask me is safety. General aviation tend to have a bad reputation in terms of its safety record. So I wanted to. This is probably the only unique slide that you will see in my presentation. Everything else you can see similar argument, similar presentations on YouTube, but this one is something that I created. So to me, there are a few different factors you can look into. It is very difficult to compare flying with driving because the two transportation methods, you tend to use different ways of measurement. In the case of flight, aviation, people use 100,000 hour flight. Essentially the number of accident or fatal accident per 100,000 hour flight. In the case of driving, people tend to use million mile driven. So you have to do some conversion, very simple math. So if you compare driving with something like motorcycle, everybody knows motorcycle is more dangerous. Fatality rate is about 5 to 7 times higher than automobile. Now airplane, the speed of airplane doesn't change very much. When you get on the air, it may vary 10 to 20%, not much more than that. So you can easily assume that roughly airplane flies about 120 miles an hour, and it doesn't change much. So if you do that conversion, and then if you use the 100,000 hour flight in terms of fatality, airplane flight on average is about the same as motorcycle driving. So it is indeed much more dangerous than driving. So that's a big factor. Now, knowing that as a background, I wanted to tell you what you can do to make flight actually safer than driving. So look at this word proof. That's a made-up word, obviously. I made it up myself. So there are 6 factors there beyond you as a pilot that can be very important in terms of safety. Number 1 is plane. It turns out that the type of airplane you fly is a bigger factor than the type of automobile that you drive. You can drive a Mercedes-Benz maybe the top of the line Mercedes-Benz luxury car. You can drive a beat-up pickup truck. The safety difference is not really huge. There is a difference, but in the case of the airplane, the difference is huge. I can tell you the average fatality per 100,000 hour flight for an average small airplane, just like this one showing on the picture, is about 1.1 to 1.2. So that's the average. So when I say flying is about 5 to 7 times more dangerous than driving, I'm assuming an average. But the plane that I'm flying, this plane here that you're looking at, this is Diamond Star, it turns out to be one of the safest one ever produced. So the record for this plane is 0.35 per 100,000 hours flown. So suddenly you already divided that reduced the danger by 70%. So it becomes 1/3 in terms of fatality rate, less than 1/3, almost like a quarter. So the type of plane that you fly is a huge factor. By selecting a safe plane, without everything else, you're almost as safe as driving. Number 2 is rating. Do you have an instrument rating? If you have an instrument rating, you are naturally safer because you won't panic. It's just a matter of time whether you are instrument rated or not. It's just a matter of time. You will be trapped in a cloud. You will see cloud. Cloud will be your problem. But if you have instrument rating, it's not going to be a problem. So that'll make it safer.
Sorry, does instrument rating you can fly with instrument without looking?
That's exactly true. So that's what it's all about. You may be essentially flying deeply in the soup. That's what they call it. You can't see anything else. It's all just cloud. That's when you don't look outside. You look inside.
You just look at...
Yeah, you just look at your panel. I'll show you a picture of the panel. So you just essentially rely on the instrument alone without looking the outside. Very, very unnatural. Very, very difficult to do for people who do not have the instrument ratings. So number 3 is ownership. If you own your own airplane, you are safer because you know what that sound, what that noise is about. You know how much gas you left in the plane. You know the history of repair. And so renting is okay, but it's not as safe as being an owner. Number 4 is hours. Hours is how much you fly. How many hours have you accumulated? Statistically, I will show you a different slide later. Statistically, within the 50 to 350 hours of your flight history, your chance of getting into an accident is more than twice of the average. So how much you fly matters a lot. So if you don't take any passenger before you reach 350 to 400 hours, you improve your factor by 2. So between the hours and plane, you are already safer than driving. Number 5 is F, frequency. Well, you may be flying 100 hours a year, which is a lot. But if you fly all of that in 2 months and the rest 8 months you don't fly, and suddenly you jump into an airplane, you tend to forget about a lot of small things. So that becomes a danger. So you want to fly as often as you can. Once a week, twice a week, once every other week. That would be great. Now, the last factor is financial. That doesn't mean how much money you have. What's important is how you look at money. I want to give you a quick story. A pilot in the UK decided to fly his girlfriend to Paris for a shopping trip. And before they fly back to the UK, the ground crew asked them whether they wanted to fill up the airplane with gasoline. The pilot said, well, I should be able to make it. Fuel is cheaper back home. So he decided not to fill the fuel. They took on the flight. And as we all know, it's water between Paris and London. So what he forgot about was on the way back, it was strong headwind. So he ended up running out of gas and didn't make it to land and crashed and killed both of them. So how you look at money is a big factor. That's part of the reason a lot of the accidents happen on the way back rather than on the way out. Because when you need to go home, you got to go to work. If you don't go home, you can't work. You got to rent a hotel room. You got to rent a car, and so there's a money issue there. So if you care about money too much, you can actually get into trouble. So all of the factors, if you do all the right things in the sixth category, you'll be so much more safer than driving. Now, I haven't even mentioned the bigger factor. The bigger factor is yourself, the pilot. So if you're a good pilot, you're a safe pilot, you do the right thing, you use the checklist, and you can add another factor to make yourself even safer. So that's at the end of the day, I can confidently tell you, you do the right thing, you can make flying much, much safer than driving. A lot of the commercial pilots use this as an interesting statement. The statement is the most dangerous trip of a pilot is his drive to the airport. That usually means the commercial pilot, because commercial flight is much, much safer. But you can do the same thing, do all the right thing to essentially to claim the same statement. You can make yourself so much safer by flying. Now, I mentioned about 50 hours to 350 hours. I wanted to show you this chart. It is quite striking. Took it down from a book. You can
Barry,
see.
Before you move on, I think there's another factor you missed.
Yeah.
There's a factor that's your gender. I think men are a lot safer than women.
That's a very dangerous thing to say. Well, I'm not sure that's true because the male to female ratio in the pilot generation is 20-1. So those female who actually become pilot, they're extremely good. They're one of the few really good ones. So I would not hesitate to jump into the plane piloted by a female. So look at this chart here. This is 0 to 50 hours. The number is here. And between 50 and 350, this is huge. This is like a mountain. So this is so much more dangerous than area over here, anything beyond 350. So that doesn't mean, you got to cross that anyway, right? You can't reach 400 before you go through 200, 230, and 350. You just need to be much more careful. For me, I did not start taking friends and families to places until I was beyond 350 hours. So right now, my hours is about 850. So I'm over here. So after this hours, it tends to plateau, so it doesn't change much anymore. So there's something to be said about 50 and 350 hours. You just need to be really careful. So obviously, you just got a pilot license here, and you are careful in the beginning. And suddenly you feel like you can do everything. You get into trouble. And a lot of people don't fly very often. Some average U.S. pilot fly less than 50 hours a year, more like 40 hours a year. So 350 hours is almost 8 or 9 years of flying. So you can just essentially park a plane in a hangar for like half a year, then you jump in an airplane. You may be rusty. So you really wanted to look at this chart to know what you want to do to be safe for yourself and your passengers. So so we were talking about instrument flight. Let's look at cost. The big factor on the cost is the avionics, the electronics. Between this avionics and this avionics, this set of avionics, it's the money worth of this set of avionics is 3 times the average worth of an airplane, which is about $25,000. So next time you see an airplane flying in the air, the buzzing, you look at it, and you know the average cost of those airplanes that are buzzing in the air, they cost about $25,000. But to get a good instrument like this, avionics like this, they could cost you $75,000 more than a typical. So this is a modern instrument. It's essentially so-called a glass cockpit. But the average airplane has this so-called a 6-pack, the steam gauge. Very basic, much more prone for issues, defects. But this is much safer. So if you look at the cost figure, I essentially separate the figures by a few items here. To take a lesson, if you don't have your own airplane, you need to spend about $150 to $200 an hour. Then think about you need about 80 hours of a flying before you actually can get your license. So it's about $14,000 on average before you get your private pilot license, PPL. So it is certainly a lot of money. However, the reason I showed you my own timeline was I took a different approach. I bought an airplane, and then I bought another airplane. I don't treat those two purchases as consumption. I treat them as investment. So the first airplane, by the time I sold it, I bought it for $50, and I sold it at $35. So I lost $15,000. But the plane, by the time I sold it, has flown 1,000 hours. So I was getting $25 an hour, so that's $25,000 income. So I paid $10,000 deposit, but I made $25,000 on that airplane. So at the end of the day, I didn't spend any money on getting my license. I actually made money. So there are ways you can essentially hedge your cost and be intelligent and do the right thing. At the end, if I knew what I know now, I probably wouldn't buy the first 2 airplane. I'd probably just buy my third. Knowing that's what I was going to fly anyway. So I'll just buy the right plane for me, take my lesson in it. So then by the time I fly on my own, I know inside and out. I'm very comfortable with it. That's probably what I would do. Initially, I thought, why would I want to buy a nice airplane and to learn it? And because chances are, just like driving, you're going to hit something, right? You're going to damage something. No, you don't. Being a pilot, being a student pilot in the first 0 to 50 hours, if you look at that chart, you're just as safe as any other pilot after 400 hours. So there's no issue. So before you get your license, the chance for you to ding that airplane or somehow damage it one way or the other is extremely, extremely low. But I didn't know that. So I bought a, beat up airplane. But when I bought it, it cost me $50,000. So my instructor was telling me, he said, if you spend that kind of money on an airplane, you will be the hero of the flight school, because no other plane is as nice as yours. And it turns out to be true. I couldn't believe him, but it turns out to be true. Once I got my airplane, everybody wants to fly that airplane. And that's why it accumulated so much hours after just a year or two. So my story is extremely unusual. I was also lucky. But on the other hand, you can do things to justify and to actually alter the actual cost of your lesson. So you probably don't need to spend $14,000 at the end. So once you get your license, you spend $14,000, you didn't buy a plane, you got your license, now you're going to think about buying a plane. Now, do you want to buy, or do you want to lease, or do you want to partner? In general, I was told that you need to fly about 100 hours a year before you consider buying one. If you fly 40 hours, 50 hours a year, you're better off just by renting it, leasing it, or buying into a partial ownership. So you can spend very little on an airplane. But if you wanted to buy an airplane that is safe, that's comfortable, and people enjoy sharing with you, you probably want to consider getting a plane with this kind of instrument. Because ultimately, it'll take you home. And with an instrument like this, you can see the weather, you can see other traffic, you can see the wind speed, you can see the wind direction, you can see the outside temperature, you can see your engine performance, and you have emergency measures, you got radios. So it has a lot more built into an instrument like this to make you safer. So I'm all for something like that. Now, if you look at the overall cost, once you have your own plane, you decided to buy the Bullet and do that. If you were to rent planes, you'd probably be talking about $100 to $200 an hour if you rent it. Usually on the high end of 100, close to $200 an hour. But if you buy an airplane, your cost per year, it could vary from $10,000 to $20,000 a year. So you need to be true to yourself. Do you have that kind of budget? Do you want to spend that kind of money on airplanes? But that's fundamentally the cost. So the alternative is, if you don't want to buy, you can rent. You can join a club. You can be a partial ownership. You know, there are many different ways of doing it. But the joy itself, to me, is more than worth it. So number 4, now you decided you're going to take the lesson. You're ready to jump into it. You got your budget, finance, and everything. And so what are the important factors you wanted to look into in terms of choosing the place you wanted to learn? To me, location is just like real estate. Location is very, very important. I have an airport. The airport closest to me is Trenton, TTN. It's only 12 minutes of a drive. It's a huge airport. It got 2 runways, cross runways, so you never have crosswind. The runway is 150 feet wide. It's 6,000 feet long. So I can take off and land 3 times on that same runway, and practice 3 times. And so it's so much safer. And then also think about, once you start, once you start, it takes a lot of commitment, a lot of effort. It could be winter, it could be summer, it could be hot and cold and windy. You really don't want a distance to be a factor. If you have to drive an hour or even 45 minutes for a lesson that's going to last about an hour and 15 minutes, it becomes a burden. So I really think you want to pick an airport that's very close to you, so you can eliminate the factor of distance. So location is important. Now, flight instructor personality is extremely important. You want to make sure you can work with somebody who's a good fit for you. Some instructors are very strict. Some are very loose. Some have pretty unusual temper. And some are maybe half of your age. And they're not there to make a career out of teaching. They're just there to earn their hours. And a year later, they may be gone to be a commercial pilot. But that doesn't mean they're not a good instructor for you. Actually, my best instructor was a young kid. And so you really need to find somebody that's a good fit for you. Don't settle. Don't say, don't feel bad about changing. If you're not happy with that pilot, with that instructor, just say, I feel that I should work with another instructor just to make a better feel. Cost is a factor. Some airport, like the airport near me, Trenton, is more like $200 an hour because their leasing of the parking is more expensive, fuel is more expensive, everything is more expensive. So bigger airport tend to cost you more. Smaller airport costs you less. So that's a factor. Commitment is really, really big. So out of every 100 new pilot who start taking lesson, even just one lesson, 80 of them will quit sooner or later. So only 20 of them will eventually get a pilot license. So it takes a lot of commitment and grit. And I knew I was not going to quit. So that's why I put a $10,000 deposit into the school on day one. Turning back was never an option. I think you really wanted to have that kind of a commitment yourself, determination before you jump into it. Otherwise, you get a couple of lessons of the joy, you're going to waste a lot of money. Timing. I wanted to pick up flying actually back in early 1990s, right before I finished my graduate school. I saw an advertisement out of Princeton Airport. This is $40 an hour of a training, essentially a starting rate. And I said to myself, wow, I could be a pilot. But that was not a good timing because I was still a student. I didn't have any money. I didn't have time. I didn't have any mission. I didn't have any purpose. So what do I do? What do I do with a pilot license even if I get it back then? I wouldn't have the time and money to go anywhere, hiking or skiing or fishing or doing anything. So getting the license back then, even though I wanted to do it, it was not a good timing for me. So 2013, well, that was 20-some years later. I was free. I could justify the cost. The kids are not there anymore. I was doing everything myself. So I had the time, and I wanted to go hiking. I want to go see places. So timing is important. You want to think about whether that's a good fit for you too. Is this right for you to do it now or wait another 2 years? Now, lastly, this is really related to number 2, personality of your flight instructor. If you're not happy, just change. I had 7 instructors by the time I got my instrument rating. So some of them I didn't change. Some of them just left. They were commercial pilot. They move on. They became became commercial pilots. So they just leave. But a lot of them, I fly with them for a few hour lessons, and I could tell that it's not good fit for me. Well, the one I changed, the most critical one I changed was I was learning from one particular instructor. I felt I was ready to fly myself. He would not let me, and I was really frustrated. I knew I could do it. I was confident. He didn't feel comfortable. So I said, you know what? I want to fly with somebody else. So I changed the pilot, fly with him for 1 hour. He said, go, you can fly on yourself. So he was ready. So that was really the best change I made. Otherwise, I would probably be grinding for another who knows how many more hours. So the new instructor, he felt the way I felt. So I really felt that was the best change I made on that. So don't be shy. Change it until you find your best one and stick to it and work really hard. This is not my last slide, but it's close to the last. We've actually eating 40 minutes already. But to me, it's a dream coming true to me, flying the dream. Every flight is exciting. A lot of times I enjoy the surfing the cloud more than the hike that I ended up doing after the flight. So at the end, I don't really care where I go. As long as I get to fly, I want to go. So flying itself is an adventure, is an enjoyment. It's very often more exciting than the destination. People ask me where you've been to. You know, if you look at this chart here, this is my home in Trenton. The yellow circle signify my day trip by driving. I can go to Harriman, I can go to Bear Mountain, I can still come back before the end of the day, but not much further than that. And that's it. That was my circle of activity for decades, probably 2 decades. So the little airplane I bought, it tripled my distance. So I can go in the green circle and come back on the same day. There are planes out there, still single engine, still pretty efficient. That could make that even further. That, you know, something like 200 nautical miles, 190 nautical miles of an airplane per hour, it could get you to Maine and come back in the same day. So it is an amazing transportation tool. So the average speed for my airplane is a little bit faster than average, about 150 to 160 miles an hour. And don't forget, I fly straight, A to B. So that cut my travel time by at least 60%. My rule of thumb is if driving is going to take me 9 hours, flying from airport to airport usually is about 3 hours. So 1/3. Then you got to add the time. You got to rent a car. You got to drive to the airport. You're not really saving 70%. You're saving probably 60% based on my plane right now. Now, some people say you're burning a lot of gas. It's not sustainable. Well, if you look at my gas mileage, it's really not that bad. 20 miles a gallon, flying 160 miles an hour. And because I'm flying straight, I'm not doing zigzag. So I can save another 25 miles because the distance, straight distance, is about 25% less than a road distance. So I get about 25 miles a gallon. And if you say going to Boston is 300 miles, well, I would bet if I were to fly, I get 25 miles a gallon in my airplane. Well, the other item is that intensive learning itself. It is very, very demanding. It is very, very tough, but it is so much of an enjoyment. To me, it's like getting another college degree. I've been consumed by flying since 2013. You know, every hour I was thinking about flying, and you know, when I cook, I would listen to ATC communication. When I eat, I watch YouTube. I watch how other people land, how other people take off, and so you know, you spend all these years. I spent almost 5 years on flying. And I had two other magazines I've been subscribing. I just don't get to read them. And everything is about flying. It is so intensive. It is so interesting. It really keep my mind sharp. It is a tremendous learning process, and it is something that's ongoing. You never get a degree like a college degree and say, okay, I'm done. But flying, you're always learning. There's always something you can learn to make you safer. So lastly, sharing. You know, the joy of sharing was something that I didn't expect. I was thinking about flying myself. I even bought a foldable mountain bike so I could fly to places, park, and then ride my bike to places. I did that for about 4 or 5 trips. And suddenly friends wanted to join me. And I've been flying. I've been taking friends to hiking. Almost all my flight are accompanied by passengers, friends. That is amazing amount of joy I didn't expect. So it is truly a blessing for me to pick up flying. Now, this is my last slide. I happen to be texting with my flight instructor. Bob Cherry was my last flight instructor, and he was one of my best flight instructors. And he was the one I bought the airplane for. This yellow airplane, the tail number is 61763. It was 1973 Cessna 172M. It cost me $45,000. Now Bob has been paying me about $500 a month. So to me, it's like buying a condo. But it's better than a condo, because if you buy a condo to rent it to somebody, you're responsible for the roof, you're responsible for the refrigerator, for the floor, plumbing, everything. But in the case of an airplane, hey, I buy the plane, it's all his. He pays for insurance, he pays for tie down, he pays for repair, oil change, anything that goes wrong, he pays for everything. All I need is probably every few years, more than a few years actually, every 2,000 to 4,000 hours to do an engine overhaul. But chances are I probably will sell this plane before that happens. So it becomes more like an investment. So this airplane actually is making money for me. So rather than becomes an expense or a consumption, it becomes more of an investment. Well, this is what Bob texted me today. I was asking him how he was doing. He said, I was ill for 13 weeks this year, and my wife had a minor stroke. The only thing keeping us sane is my love affair with the 6176V. 6176V is this little airplane. And the folks who fly with me in this incredible bird. Looking forward to share a flight and lunch or dinner with you if it ever stops snowing. Be well, my friend. So you can imagine, he's 84. He got 27,000 hours behind him. He's been an instructor for 40 years. But this little airplane I bought for him is essentially his life. He make a living out of it. That's his joy. So that's really what a pilot is all about. You have true passion. And all you have to do is to find a purpose. Then you have a mission. Combining the two, then you have the best joy in the world. So that's the end of my presentation. And let's see, that took, wow, we have 8 minutes for question and answers. Hey, Jackson. Are you still there, Jackson? All right, he's gone.
He's on the list. Hey, Barry, I have one question.
Sure.
What is you said you don't have to notify the destination airport, but what if the destination airport you want to go is not available by the time you reach it?
Very, very good question. There is something called a NOTAM. NOTAM is abbreviation for Notice for Airmen, NOTAM. So every single airport has a NOTAM. So you do need to read about it before you go. So that's your responsibility. As a pilot, before you go to any airport, you need to read about it. So the airport is not covered by snow, the runway is not being repaired, there is not a repair vehicle on the runway. So that's your responsibility. So
it's totally at your hand. That means.
Yeah, it's all about you, the pilot, who do the homework and to make sure that everything lines up.
Okay, so whenever you go, you always have your first destination. Do you usually have a backup in your mind for the second destination in case the first one is not available?
By law, you're not required. However, if the weather is not very good, if you have low ceiling, low visibility, you are required to have a backup airport. You actually need to put that in your flight plan. So usually that airport is an airport, chances are, has a better weather condition. And so yes, so it's yes and no. To fly in a blue sky day, you don't have to, but it's not a bad idea to have one.
Okay, I see. Maybe one more question.
Yeah, sure.
I'm just curious. Do you have a parachute? Or are you allowed to carry one?
Nobody would say no. You can have a parachute if you decided to do that yourself, but all these small airplanes are not designed for you to be safely deploying a parachute. So it's usually not a good idea. It's cumbersome. It's not necessary. I have not met a single pilot who has a parachute. However, there are airplanes. That are designed to have a much bigger parachute for the entire plane. So something were to go wrong, you're 4,000 feet in the air. You have no other alternative. You can pull the lever, and you will deploy the parachute. The whole plane will come down under a parachute.
So you don't intend to get one, right?
Well, that's not something you can buy one, because the plane is either come with it or it doesn't come with it. Now, the interesting fact is this: the plane that's best known to have the parachute, the plane's name is Cirrus. That plane actually has a worse safety record than those who do not. You remember I was saying 1.1 fatality per 100,000 hours flown. That's the industry average. Cirrus, the one that has the parachute, started out with 1.6, 1.4, 1.3. Now is about the industry average, 1.2. So my airplane that doesn't have a parachute is 0.35. It's actually much, much safer than the one who has a parachute.
That's interesting.
So it's almost like an SUV. You know, if you drive a SUV, big SUV, you feel like you're invincible. You're never going to get into trouble. You tend to be less careful. And so I don't know the statistics, but I wouldn't be surprised if the SUV driver tend to get themselves into trouble more often than a typical family car driver. There's some similarity between that and the airplane with a parachute.
Okay, I see. One more question.
Yeah.
Does your plane have a cockpit voice recording system?
No, there's only one or two airplanes I know of that has a so-called a black box. Vast majority of these little airplanes do not have any recorder.
Okay, I see.
However, I have a Bluetooth headphone. So if I want to, I can connect my cell phone to the headset set, and I will be able to record everything we say in the airplane. So I can do that.
But watch out, Rebecca.
What's that?
Rebecca have to watch out. What is she saying?
Yeah, I know.
Is that the Amy?
Yeah, Harry. Is that required flying hour before you have a license?
Yeah, legally you need to have 40 hours minimum before you can be a licensed pilot. So you need to have a written test. You need to have a road test. So the examiner will not even accept you unless you have at least 40 hours of a flying time. But the average is about more like 70 to 80.
So that's in the news. The airplane went down in New York. They say somebody touched the fuel shut off button. How that is possible? The button is just laying out of there.
I know that's every single airplane has a switch. In this case, it's the fuel cutoff switch. So if you hit the switch, you exhaust the engine with fuel. Helicopters tend to fly very, very low. So the pilot usually do not have the time to restart the engine. If he were to fly the way I fly, 5,000 feet in the air, 3,000 feet in the air, I will have plenty of time to restart the engine, knowing nothing went wrong. But in the case of a helicopter, they were probably below World Trade Center. They were probably below a few hundred feet above the water. So once the engine quit, you just simply do not have enough time to restart the engine. Then the only way to go is to go down. So you can actually, if you see the video, the helicopter went down very gently, and so he did a very soft landing. But the problem with that landing was the pilot did not ask all the passengers to undo their seatbelt.
Right.
Knowing it was going to be a soft landing, so he should have told all the pilots to undo their seatbelt. So once the airplane hit the water, it sunk. It sunk to the bottom, but the pilot, he knows where the button were, so he could free himself, but the passengers didn't. So they essentially drowned. They were fine when they landed. So really, that's the problem.
Yeah, I mean, the design, there shouldn't be a button could be shut off by accident.
I agree. Well, the switch should be more hidden. It shouldn't be easily accessed by anybody.
Yeah.
Okay, Barry, one more question.
Yeah.
I know you must have insurance. So you need what kind of coverage does the insurance company provide for a small plane? The coverage, I believe, is $2 million. So it covers the damage to the airplane, and then any damage outside of the airplane. And also covers the passenger. I don't remember how much it covers the passenger in terms of medical or anything else. But yeah, it's a $2 million policy. Okay. Does that mean it's also the coverage for the fatality?
For who?
That means, I mean, you know, is there any coverage for the fatality? That means air crashes. Oh,
no. Probably no. If somebody were to die, and then you're saying, say, essentially covering lawsuit, it's probably not enough.
Okay, I see.
So it's not a life insurance policy. Somebody else had a question.
Hi, Barry. Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, sure.
Winston, if I were to start learning, which airplane should I choose? There are several types with different prices.
I would highly recommend the plane that I fly, Diamond. I did a lot of research. It's like I said, it's one of the safest airplane ever made, if not the safest airplane ever made.
Yeah.
So it is a big investment because it costs more. The depreciation will be something that you need to consider because you spend. Let's just say you spend the same amount of money I spent on, say $180,000. A year later, you could lose $10,000. Another year, another $10,000 just by depreciation. You don't have to do anything. Just the plane to sit in the hangar, you could be losing money every day. So that's really the biggest cost when you buy on a plane like that. However, I think it's worth it. It's so much more enjoyable. It is so much safer.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can. If I just learn the older type of planes, I cannot fly the new type, right?
Well, I learned with the old type, like the Cessna, the one showing on the picture.
Yeah.
Everybody learns on a Cessna. And once you finish Cessna on your learning, you jump to the new airplane. The insurance company requires me to have 3 hours of training in the new plane with the instructor. That's all.
Oh.
Just 3 hours. You use something, nobody really watch you. You just write it on your logbook. You say, I've done 3 hours. Then you are allowed to fly. Legally, there's no requirement. You can fly any airplane you want. But the insurance company knows it's not safe. So I took 9 hours of the lesson before I decided to fly myself. So I hired an instructor who knows that airplane really well, and 9 hours later, and I was still nervous. I was still very nervous the first time I flew my own airplane because he was gone. Nobody was next to me. But after the first flight, I was very confident.
Yeah.
Also, Barry, how often do you need to do the pre-flight checkup?
It depends on pilot. Some are more careful than others. I spend about between 2 to 5 minutes pre-flight my airplane, looking around because airplanes are so big. You want to make sure nobody has hit your tail, and you don't want to take off with a damage on the tail. And you want to make sure there's no oil leakage, there's no fuel leakage, there's no ice on the wing, and there's no bird nest. And you want to make sure everything is moving. So it's about, to me, about 5 minutes. Some people spend 10 to 15 minutes on it.
Okay, I see. You're good, I know.
Thank you.
Gary, one final question. If I fly with you today, and if I need to land the plane myself, what's the chance of me to land?
Well, the chance for you to land, if I tell you beforehand what to do, you will. Yeah. If I don't touch anything, you will be able to land. But the most likely scenario is the airplane will be damaged.
Yeah.
You will not. You will live. Yes, you will live. But the airplane will almost certainly be damaged.
Okay. Good.
So, well, if there's no further question, I just wanted to tell you that there are at least 2 or 3 different examples of wife who actually land the plane after the husband passed away in the middle of the flight. So the wife would essentially pick up the telephone, the radio communication, and if somebody were to talk to her and guide her. In one case, another pilot actually flew next to her, guided her to an airport, and she landed. And I've heard about at least 3 different stories of similar type. And non-pilot never flown anything but landed the airplane, walked away without any scrap, but damaged the airplane.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah. All right. Well, I will be available so I can answer more questions, after this seminar. So thank you all for attending this seminar. I will put it on YouTube, and then I'll send you the link. Thank you very much. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you. Thank you.